We're going to begin this afternoon session is dedicated to exploring CSR projects and project planning. We're especially going to be focusing on the opportunity for projects that connect with values education, drug addiction prevention or addiction prevention in the first part. And then we're going to hear something about the work of the Govardhan Eco Village team from Sanat Kumar. He'll be coming around 5:30. He'll present something of what they're doing. And we'll talk a little bit about replicating those models. And we'll be talking at that time also about a new framework, which no one has really done yet, which is a truly socially oriented program for cow protection. Most of us, we've heard Goshala, Goshala, Goshala. But when we talk about CSR, we have to go beyond Goshala. We have to go into protecting cows, not only for the welfare of the cows, but for the welfare of society as well, and how it integrates with agriculture, with many other things. But before we do that, I wanted to spend just a little bit more time on the whole area of project design. You may remember me drawing circles in the air the other day. So these are the circles that we were talking about. The first one was the circle of needs. What are the needs of that community where we're trying to work? That area where we're trying to make some impact. Of course, our mission must be there. There may be so many needs. Like in the Schedule 7, you'll see there's 2 or 3 areas which I just put not applicable. It's just not in our mission. It's not that there's anything wrong with them, but it's not in our mission. And lastly is, well, where's the resources? Where are the funding? What money is available? And when this comes together here, we get our strategic focus for our planning. When we get into planning, it starts with our idea. We have some idea. This is what's called a project cycle. It begins with our ideas, which then leads to designing a project, which leads to appraising the feasibility, the doability of that project. Is it really going to work? Once we're satisfied, okay, we've checked off the boxes, we begin implementing the project. As we implement, we have to monitor things so that we can then evaluate the results. Based on our evaluation, we then learn and we adapt and we begin this process over again. It's a continuous process of project implementation. I wanted to just go through one of the most fundamental aspects of project design, which is developing what we call the program logic. I won't go really deeply into this because it would take some time, but I'm going to just generally walk you through this concept of program logic. Program logic is very simple. It's a roadmap for a project that sets out how a project will achieve its desired outcomes. How your planned work leads to your intended results. So knowing what your intended results are, of course, that's the first thing. And then how logically do you get from here to here? In this, you're going to find out what's the outcome logic, what's the logic of the outcomes, what's the model of your outcome, what's your logical model and your outcome hierarchy. But these terms are a little complicated, maybe except some of you who have some NGO background, project development background may be more familiar with this. So don't get lost in these terms. But just basically it's your theory of change. How does what you do, how does it result in what kind of change? A project means that you're going from here and you're getting to here. What's not a project? Arti. Performing arti in the temple is not a project. It's an activity. It's a very wonderful activity, but it's not a project because there's no change involved. It's not like you're going from state A to state B. Of course, in your heart you may be. That project is going on. But there's no change being affected in the general world. Now, building a building, of course, that's a project. You start with a blank, empty space, and then you end up with a building. It's very easy to understand that. But when it comes to social projects, you don't end up with a building, a structure, but you do end up with something. And you have to know what it is you're trying to end up with. And you have to know where you're starting from in order to get to that place. And what's the logic of why what you do, the activities that you're going to do in the project, will actually lead to an outcome? Why should it work? So it's the pathway to reaching your destination. For example, in order to complete a project evaluation, you need to learn about the knowledge of evaluation and undertake it, practice, to reach the end goal. So that's like what you need to do. How do you do this? How do you develop your program logic? You start with the people that are involved in the project. You start by interacting with the people that you intend to work with and affect, or have something to do with it. You involve them, maybe through a workshop. You get your core goals and objectives. I have another presentation on what's called the problem tree. Anyone here heard of a problem tree? Problem tree methodology? Anyway, we don't have time to get into that, but I'll be sharing with you some slide presentations on these things also, so you can start learning. And what is it? How things are going to change. So when we're going in this afternoon, we're going to be talking about values education project. And we're going to be looking a little bit at this. What's the logic of the project? What's going to change? The theory of change is within the program logic. What is the theory of change? In other words, I have a logic for a program, and that, my theory of how things change, that informs the logic of this program. So they're almost interchangeable. How do you do it? Well, one way is what's called a backcasting process. You start by envisioning this is the future. This is where we want to be. And then you work backwards to identify what needs to happen in order to create that future. So, and we can send you this. It's how to do it. Like, for example, here, this is long-term outcome, solar hot water installed in all homes. Intermediate outcome, increased uptake of solar hot water. Short-term outcome, increased knowledge of the benefits of solar hot water. Increased uptake of financial incentives for solar hot water. How do you get to this? You have to have outputs. You have brochures added to the energy bill, financial incentives provided to households. So this is a logic for a project which is supposed to end up with solar hot water installed in homes. So it starts with outputs, which lead to short-term outcomes, which lead to an intermediate outcome, and leads to a long-term outcome. So it can be from left to right or bottom up. For example, You have your inputs. What will you do? Your activities. What will you deliver? What do you hope this achieves? What your short-term outcomes are? What are your intermediate outcomes? If these are achieved, what happens next? And finally, what is your overall aim? So we're going to try to apply this a little bit. Let's see how far it goes when we talk about the youth programs. It can also be divided like this: your planned work and your intended results. These are like engage, develop, action stuff, and this is what's happening. It's in the past tense. Or it can go from bottom up, inputs, activities, and so on. This is an example of a program logic for this presentation itself. It shouldn't be a detailed task list. It's not just, a list of everything you're going to do. But it does outline what you hope to achieve and how you will do this. What's the logic behind your project? And it provides, this is especially important, a guide as to what you should monitor and evaluate. So it's a guide to developing your monitoring questions. So that's just one small little introduction to the discipline of project planning. We are not generally so disciplined when we want to get into a project. Of course, building projects, we know we need to be a bit disciplined, isn't it? And how many of you have been involved in a building project? Building. Okay. So, how many of you hired architects and engineers to do it? Because you knew that there was a discipline here that you needed in order to get that done. So there is a discipline to planning successful social projects. It's a different discipline than building a building. There's different things involved. But some of the same concepts are there. And there's, fortunately, just like there is in civil engineering and programming, computer programming, and other technical fields, there's a lot of people ready to help train you and educate you. And there's a lot of material online. So this is another aspect of the CCC, is to help you develop your expertise in planning good, solid projects that will attract funds and will successfully deliver on the intended results. So, I had one more here. I just have a few more minutes. I want to just pull up one more on the monitoring and evaluation. Give me a second. Okay. So, a good project is one that both achieves its outcome and you can show that it did. Not that you just, I know. I mean, we distributed thousands of books and we know that thousands of people's lives have changed. I mean, you may know it in your heart, but can you actually prove it? You have no way to really prove that anything has happened except that the books went out. That much you can say. Okay, we know physically these books went out. But what change happened, it's your faith alone. So you may start a youth program and you have 10,000 people have come to your event. And they attended. And they heard and they listened and they chanted the holy names. And in your heart you believe there's been a change. But do you know? How do you know? Has there really been any change? Maybe they were all devotees. Maybe they actually got off the Navadip Mandal Parikrama and just left there and came to your program. You know. So you don't know unless you have a program for monitoring and evaluating. And it begins with who's going to look at that evaluation? Who's going to look at it? What do they want to know? Your corporate funder, they have an objective. They're going to want to know, they want to evaluate how successful this project was. What are they looking for? What are the questions that are important to them? What are the monitoring questions that you want to answer during your project? Because it's not good enough that you wait till the end and then you think, okay, now we're going to evaluate this. No, while the project is going on, you have to figure out what are the questions I need to answer while this thing is going on. And especially, what are the questions I need to answer from the beginning of the project, before it even starts. Identify the indicators. Who can give me a quick definition of an indicator? You're all familiar with at least 2 or 3 indicators.
Number of books distributed is the one indicator.
It's an indicator. That's true. Of something. And more, okay. Where's the other microphone? Just, anyway. Yeah, because I don't think everyone can hear you. It takes a second for it to start, yeah.
Hare Krishna. Example, when we consider Food for Life or hunger management program, so in case we can show the body weight of improving.
That's
like
a good one.
Nutritious value of the food.
That's a real indicator. Note the difference between that and the number of plates that was distributed. The number of plates distributed is only an indicator of the activity, not of the result. Weight gain in the target audience, that's an indicator of a result. Which leads me to one indicator that most of us are aware of. It's called the weighing scale. When I step on that scale, it's going to indicate, have I succeeded in my weight loss program or am I not succeeding? That dial. Often the example is used of the speedometer in your car is an indicator of how fast you're going. All right? So what are those indicators? Where's the source of the data to answer these questions? Then of course you have to identify, well, how are you going to get that information? Who's responsible for collecting that data and when? That all put together becomes your monitoring and evaluation plan. Your audience, what do they want to know? When do they want to know it by? You may have to prioritize this. It goes beyond measurements to ask the higher order questions, such as whether the project is worth it, or could it have been achieved in another way? When do they want to know it? That will be, like maybe they need a report in 6 months' time, so it's no use collecting data that will only be available in 12 months. So again, there's a template for this. Identify your evaluation audience, know what they need to know. You can satisfy the want to know if you have resources left over. So this is an example. Funding agency, when, so we won't go through this in detail. The program logic, we discussed that before. That can guide the development of the monitoring and evaluation plan. Put it in a template, your questions, like this. What do we want to know? Etc. How will we know it? Where is it going to come from? Where will the data come from? And other when will it be captured, cost, etc. Who will evaluate it? So, as I said, we're going through this very, very quickly because we don't really have a lot of time. But don't ask evaluation questions unless someone really needs to know the answer. Do not collect data if it will not be used to answer a question. So now you have, in a nutshell, I could have done a little thing on problem trees. I will, because it's a nice little. Let me. We have another few minutes. Because I think this is a tool that many of you will have fun using. If it will come up. Okay, something's going on here. Okay, here we go. This is a methodology that I've used in a few different projects, and it's a fun thing. You get people together, you get your stakeholders together, and you try to develop what's called a problem tree. Now, hopefully, this is going to come up. And still, we're familiar with trees. What are the parts of a tree? Roots, branches, leaves. What do we know about in our philosophy? There's something we always talk about trees and what we should be doing. Watering the root, right? What happens when we water the branches and the leaves? The tree may not flourish. Yeah, somehow this is. I think the problem is I haven't closed the other ones. So let me do that. Okay. You want to try to get this open? Anyway, I'll explain it if we can't get it open here. This is the document. How to develop a problem tree. Anyway, if you can get it open, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll just explain it. Okay, so a problem tree means that you come up with all kinds of situations which you consider to be problems. And then you try to organize them so that you ultimately find out what's the root cause. So you'll get this presentation. We don't need to take the time to do it here. But it's something that you can learn to do. And it's you get a bunch of people together. They all write down what they think are the secondary problems, or the problems, and then you order them in different ways. And then you construct this thing that ultimately, okay, you say, okay, this is going to be where we're going to focus our energy. This is where we're going to, like let's take addiction prevention. So, okay, we know that there's a problem with, say, advertising of alcohol. But is that the source? Is that why people are becoming attracted to alcohol, or is there something deeper? This is especially important for us because we know that at the root of these problems is something spiritual in the heart. And so we can arrange our problem tree. Oh, there it is. Okay. The known causes and effects to an identified problem. More often there's more than one cause. So this, where the interventions are to occur, settle on the core problem, identify the causes and effects, develop a solution tree, and select the preferred intervention. So this is, say, the core problem that you're trying to address is students becoming addicted to alcohol or drugs, right? So that's a core problem. So what are the immediate causes for that core problem? What are secondary causes that lead to this causes? What are the effects of this problem?